Survey Centre research, which I was involved in, was about the survivor movement. The boss at the time of the Sainsbury Centre wanted to know, is there a survivor movement, and if so, has it got an address? Can you write to it? Has it got a website? And it didn't. So we were trying to find out what it was. So we interviewed local people, people who ran survivor groups and networks nationally and regionally and locally across England. We just did England because it's a bit cheaper and easier to get to do the travel. And again, that was survivor researchers trained to do the work and given expenses and paid and everything. And we looked at what were the key issues for the survivor movement. And we felt that what we found was it was basically, there is a survivor movement. I mean, people feel that they belong to a movement. It didn't have much of a national profile, but it had quite a strong local and regional profile. It was somewhat predominantly white. Although there's a growing black and Asian survivor movement, but that's very poorly resourced and not always too well integrated with the mainly white movement. So there's a lot of work to do on trying to work together more across gender and ethnicity and all those kind of issues. The kind of key issues were about wanting to be treated as an individual, not a label, generally dissatisfaction with existing mental health services, opposition to any extension of compulsory treatment. Unfortunately, we didn't win that one. We've got an extension of compulsory treatment into the community now. End to discrimination and prejudice on mental health grounds, and services needing to be oriented more towards recovery, social inclusion and employment. Controversial issues were forced treatment. Not everybody was, a lot of people were against that, but not everybody. The biomedical model and social models, closer working with the disability movement. These were issues that were very controversial and needed a lot more discussion. And most of the groups were doing some kind of user involvement, and most of them were doing lots and lots of mutual support. So those were key themes that we found. At least it gave us a sense of, here's a platform, can we build on it? We now actually have a national funded service user organisation called MSUN. That partly came from that work. Anyway, I won't say any more about MSUN. It does exist. It could be more, have more impact than it's having, but there you are. Perhaps it will happen. So the sort of agenda that comes out of service users doing their own research are the following. These topics: recovery, whatever we think about recovery, but the sense that people do. If it's defined by service users, it means that actually there is most of us have got a potential to get our lives back together, given the right kind of help. That's basically what I think it means. It can be a bit. I'll come back to, if I've got time, the way it can tend to be hijacked. Self-management, that is making our own choices about medication and how we live and what kind of treatments we want, and how we manage our highs and lows and ups and downs. Strategies for living, which is similar, same kind of idea. Building our own set of strategies, coping strategies. Wellness action planning. Service user leadership and service user involvement in mainstream research, and choice in medical treatments. Those are some key themes that come out of our work. We're gradually getting the confidence to challenge the dominant biomedical model of mental health because of the kind of platform of having done quite a lot of work. One of my arguments in my PhD was that we're creating a new discourse, which is, I don't know how many people know the term discourse, but it's similar to paradigm and worldview. I got that from managing to read some of Foucault, which is quite hard work, but he uses the term discourse as a way of looking at how that research doesn't come out of nowhere. It's part of a worldview. It's part of a whole system of laws and institutions, and he particularly focused on what's it called? Bio had the creation of the concept of mental illness in history, and looked at a particular time in history, particular groupings of people that created it, and they built all these institutions, professions, laws to support that view of how reality is not, it isn't ultimate reality, you know, but all research is based on it because that's the view that's predominated. So if you actually see that, you can see that maybe there's a different kind of discourse. And by creating our own knowledge, we can begin to challenge that discourse of how things are. No, diagnoses don't exist in nature. They're just not natural phenomena. But service user involvement in mainstream research is a lot tougher to achieve. We knock on the doors, and as Alison's pointed out, they are beginning to invite us in. But actually making a real difference is quite tough. This handbook is supposed to be some kind of a bit of a platform to build on, looking at work that's already been done around the world in involvement in research. And we touch on user-led research, but we're trying more to look at how service users can be involved in mainstream research. And it's sponsored by the World Psychiatric Association, so hopefully psychiatrists might actually get hold of this and read it. Can but hope. So when we do get involved, whose terms are we involved on? Very often what happens is that we're invited to take part in research which has already been created, the questions have already been set. We're not very often invited in to plan the research and to conceptualise about what should be done. But as again, Alison's mentioned, we have had allies, and Involve has been one of the major allies in making it possible and kind of brokering the sort of an agreement between service users and governments to create safe environments for us to be involved. All research that goes to the Mental Health Research Network now, and they're kind of like they're not really the governing body for mental health research, but they are a government-sponsored organisation which tries to network mental health research. Every piece of research has to show how it's involving service users. I was manager of the SURGE project, which was the service user arm of the Mental Health Research Network, and we looked at how that was being done. We weren't. It was like supposed to be a benchmarking thing, and we found out what's the situation now and can we improve it. But we found that very often, even though every researcher had to show how they were doing involvement, very often it was a bit of a tick box exercise. You know, they would say we're going to consult with this group or that group. But when we actually looked back to find out whether they did it, sometimes they hadn't done it, or they haven't done it very well. Others were kind of understating what they had actually done and done quite a lot, so it varied a lot, but just what they write down isn't necessarily what they do. So involvement needs more than paperwork exercise, and there's a bit of a tendency for it just to be a bit of paperwork, you know, just to get through the procedures. Evidence-based medicine is one of our bugbears. You know, is it evidence-based medicine or an evidence-based NAPIA? It's based on assumptions about madness which can't be questioned in themselves, which are based on, as I've mentioned, they're 19th century and earlier notions which are so embedded in practice that they're not questioned. They don't actually say, does mental illness exist when they've done a piece of research? They say, how can we find out which drugs improve schizophrenia? So there's so many assumptions embedded in that. Yes, I don't know if people agree with me there. And the outcome measures, like, you know, how do you know whether something's worked? It works if it reduces symptoms. Well, the measures of symptoms are very, well, they're not necessarily what the kind of measures that we would develop as service users. So, and a lot of common practices, such as putting people into acute wards of hospitals, are not evidence-based, and yet they still do them. Are they going to stop putting people on wards because there's no evidence it works? No. A lot of drug trials don't show any advantage over placebo in actual fact, but they don't even have to do that. All they have to show is that they make a difference or something. They're very low criteria. You know, does this have more difference? Does it make a difference? Doesn't it have to be a good difference, sort of to do something really, and not be completely dangerous?